Romeo and Juliet. In the city of Verona there were two very rich, powerful families. These were the Capulet family and the Montague family. Many years ago, these families had a terrible quarrel. In the coming years, this quarrel got worse and worse. These families hated each other deeply. Even the servants of each family hated each other. The Montagues and the Capulets could not meet each other in the street without speaking angry words. Often they would fight each other with swords. One evening the great Lord Capulet had a large party. Many fair and rich ladies and gentlemen came. Everyone was welcome as long as they were not from the Montague family. However, one young man from the Montague family was at the party. His name was Romeo, and he was the son of the respected Lord Montague. At first Romeo hadn't wanted to come, but his friend Benvolio persuaded him. Romeo was in love with a girl named Rosaline, who was at the party. Unfortunately, Rosaline did not love Romeo. Often it is this way with men and women. "Romeo, come to the Capulets' party in disguise. No one will know you," Benvolio had said. "I will show you the most beautiful girls in Verona. Then you will forget about Rosaline." Romeo didn't believe Benvolio, but he wanted to go to the party anyway to see Rosaline. Romeo was a good and true lover. He loved deeply. Often he would stay up all night thinking of Rosaline. But Rosaline never paid attention to him. Romeo, Benvolio, and their friend Mercutio arrived at the party. Romeo was in disguise, so the Lord Capulet did not know him. He welcomed the three friends to the party. That night, Lord Capulet was light-hearted and merry. "I once wore a mask too when I was young," he said to Romeo. "I would whisper stories in young ladies' ears." The three friends ate, drank, and danced. While they were dancing, Romeo saw a girl he had never seen before. He looked at her, and then looked again. Soon he could not stop staring at her. She was the most beautiful, wonderful-looking girl he'd ever seen. "She could teach the lights how to shine brightly," he said. "She shines like the richest jewels worn by Arab men. Her beauty is too much for this earth. No other lady in this room can compare to her." When Romeo spoke these words, he was heard by a man named Tybalt. Tybalt was Lord Capulet's nephew. Tybalt, who was a loud and angry young man, recognized Romeo's voice. "It is Romeo Montague," he shouted. "He is here in disguise. He has come to laugh at our celebrations." But the Lord Capulet would not allow Tybalt to hurt Romeo during the party. "He has behaved like a gentleman," Lord Capulet said. "All people in Verona speak well of him. Leave him alone for now, Tybalt." Tybalt was very angry at being told to wait. He would make Romeo pay some day. When the dancing was done, Romeo looked for the mysterious young lady. When he found her, he went over and took her hand. "Your hand is like a temple which no one should touch," he said to the young lady. "But I have touched it, so I will kiss it in punishment."
"Good sir, your words are too kind. The saints have hands which people can touch, but they cannot kiss them,"
said the lady. "Saints have lips too, don't they?" asked Romeo, staring at the lady.
"Yes, lips which they must use for prayer,"
said the lady. They continued to talk for a little longer. Romeo continued to speak words of love to the lady, and she responded. It was clear that they were deeply attracted to each other. Suddenly the lady said,
"I hear my mother calling to me. I must go."
"Who is your mother?" asked Romeo. It was then that Romeo discovered that this young lady was Juliet, daughter of the Lord and Lady Capulet. These families had sworn to be enemies forever, but Romeo had just fallen in love with one of these enemies. It was a terrible situation, but Romeo could not stop thinking about Juliet. Juliet was just as troubled when she discovered that Romeo was a Montague. She felt the same way about Romeo. Her feelings were quick and wild.
How strange it is that I should love the one man my family has told me to hate,
she said. Now it was midnight, and so Romeo left with his friends. However, he soon decided to return to Juliet's house alone. He needed to see her again. Romeo ran back to Juliet's house and jumped over a garden wall. He didn't know it, but this garden was right below Juliet's room. Romeo walked around the garden for a while, thinking about his love. Suddenly, he saw Juliet. She was standing on a balcony, staring at the moon. Romeo hid in the shadows of the garden and watched her. "Juliet is so much more beautiful than the moon," whispered Romeo. "Her beauty shines as brightly as the sun." Romeo watched Juliet put her hand on her cheek. "I wish I were a glove on that sweet hand," he said. Juliet did not see or hear her lover. She looked troubled.
"Oh my,"
she sighed. "Speak again, bright angel," whispered Romeo. His eyes shone brightly.
"Oh, Romeo, Romeo, where are you, Romeo?"
said Juliet sadly.
"Deny your father and the name of Montague. Do this for me. Or, if you will not do these things, then be my promised lover, and I will no longer be a Capulet."
Romeo almost cried out, but he wanted to hear more of these sweet words. Still thinking that she was alone, Juliet continued to talk to herself. She wished Romeo came from some other family. He should give up the Montague name.
"This name is not part of you. It means nothing. If you give it up, you will have all of me,"
cried Juliet. Romeo now spoke. "Then call me love, or whatever you like," he said. "I am no longer Romeo, a Montague, if that name makes you sad." At first Juliet was frightened to hear a man's voice in her garden. She thought some other man had entered the garden and discovered her secret love, but she soon realized it was Romeo. She was very concerned, telling him he should be careful. They might be discovered by her parents or a servant. If Romeo was found, they would kill him because he was a Montague. "No," said Romeo, "there is more danger in your eyes than 20 of their swords. If you only look kindly at me, then I am protected. It is better if my life were ended by their hatred than that I should live and live without your love."
"How did you come here?"
asked Juliet. "Love showed me the way," said Romeo. "I am not a pilot, but even if you were 1,000 miles away, I would find you." These words made Juliet's face turn red. She felt extremely happy. She felt a little unsure because she had not meant for Romeo to know about her love. During these times, it was the custom for ladies to be a little cruel to their lovers at first. Ladies had to pretend not to care about these men, and say mean things to them, even when they loved them. The difficulty of winning a lady makes her more valuable to a man. Juliet could not pretend that she didn't love Romeo. He had heard the words from her mouth.
"There, Romeo. Do not think that because I loved you so soon after we met, I am not worthy,"
she said.
"I am more honest than other women, and my love is more true."
Romeo said that he could never think badly of Juliet. He wanted to climb up the wall and see her, but Juliet thought this was a dangerous idea. Romeo wanted to exchange a vow of love and marriage to Juliet.
"You already heard my words of love before,"
said Juliet.
"but I will say them again. My love for you is as deep as the ocean. But not now. I hear my nurse calling. It is late, and I must go to sleep."
Juliet left for a minute, but soon came running back.
"If your words are honorable, and you want to marry me, then leave now Tomorrow, I will send a messenger to you. You can decide the time for the marriage. After we are married, I will follow you anywhere in the world, for you will be my lord."
When the two lovers were talking, Juliet's nurse kept calling her. Juliet didn't want to leave Romeo, and Romeo didn't want to leave her either. The sweetest music for lovers is the sound of each other's voices. When they finally left each other, Romeo was too excited to sleep. Instead of going home, he went to the house of a priest he knew. This kind old priest was named Friar Lawrence, and he was like a father to young Romeo. When Friar Lawrence saw Romeo, he knew something had happened. "You have not slept," said the friar. "You look as if love has kept you awake. Have you been thinking about Rosaline?" "Oh no," cried Romeo. "I never really loved Rosaline. I now have a true love, the only love of my life. You must help us to marry." Romeo then told Friar Lawrence about Juliet. The friar was amazed at Romeo's change of heart. At first the friar didn't believe that Romeo's feelings were real. "You remember how you loved Rosaline. You young men are always changing your minds about women," he scolded. But Romeo said, "Friar, you scolded me for loving Rosaline. You said she would never love me in return. Now I love Juliet, who loves me back. Isn't this better?" After some time, the friar agreed to marry Romeo and Juliet. He believed that a marriage between these two families might be a good thing. It might stop their anger at and hatred of each other. Romeo felt very lucky. He told Juliet's messenger everything that had happened. "Tell my lady to meet me at Friar Lawrence's home early tomorrow morning." The next morning, Romeo and Juliet were married. After this joyful event, Juliet had to go home. She was very impatient for night-time, when she and Romeo would meet in the garden. The hours seemed to last forever. That same day, Romeo's friends Benvolio and Mercutio were walking around the town of Verona. They soon met a group of Capulet men. Juliet's cousin, the angry Tybalt, was with them. When Tybalt saw Mercutio, he shouted, "You, Mercutio! You are a friend of the horrible Romeo, the Montague!" Mercutio was just as brave and bold as Tybalt. He became angry at hearing his friend Romeo spoken of in this way. Benvolio tried to calm the men down, but they began to shout and quarrel with each other. Everyone took out their swords. It seemed that a fight was about to begin when Romeo walked by. Tybalt immediately forgot about Mercutio. "It is the villain Romeo! The criminal Romeo!" he yelled. Romeo did not want to fight with Tybalt. Romeo was a very intelligent and gentle young man. He knew that fighting wouldn't solve anything. Besides, he did not hate the Capulet family. How could he, when his lady, Juliet, was a Capulet? Juliet liked her cousin very much, so Romeo didn't want to quarrel with him. Romeo spoke calmly to Tybalt, whom he called Good Capulet. But Tybalt hated all Montagues, like he hated hell and the devil. He wouldn't listen to Romeo. Tybalt wielded his sword and tried to attack Romeo, but Mercutio jumped between them and fought with Tybalt instead. Sadly, Tybalt killed Mercutio. Now Romeo was extremely angry and forgot all his kind feelings. Tybalt had killed one of his best friends. Romeo attacked Tybalt, and the two men fought for a long time. Hatred was in their eyes. Romeo was able to kill Tybalt in revenge. Now both Mercutio and Tybalt lay dead in the street. All this fighting occurred during the day. Soon a large crowd was standing around the young men. In this crowd were the lords Capulet and Montague with their wives. Soon after, the Prince of Verona came. He was related to Mercutio. The prince was very tired of these fights between the Capulets and Montagues. They ruined the peace and quiet of his city. So he was very firm about punishing the young men. Benvolio, you saw all the fighting. Tell us all what happened, the prince commanded Benvolio. Benvolio told the whole story. Lady Capulet was very upset at Tybalt's death. She asked the prince to punish Romeo as badly as possible. This lady did not know that Romeo was her daughter Juliet's husband, of course. Lady Montague begged for her son's life. She said that Romeo had done nothing wrong in killing Tybalt.
This Tybalt was already a prisoner of the law, because he killed Mercutio,
she said. The prince did not pay attention to these women. He thought for a little while and then said, I have decided. This Romeo can never enter Verona again. When Juliet heard what had happened, she was terribly upset, frightened, and extremely angry. She was angry that Romeo had killed her cousin, and now she couldn't see him anymore, and they had just been married. At first Juliet could not decide between her love and her anger. She did not know whether to hate Romeo or love him. But soon love won, and Juliet cried tears of joy and sadness.
I am so glad that Romeo lives, when Tybalt might have killed him. But when will I see him again?
Meanwhile, Romeo had gone to Friar Lawrence's house to hide. For Romeo, the prince's punishment was more terrible than death. How would he see Juliet? To Romeo, there was no world outside of Verona, no life without Juliet. Heaven was where Juliet was. Hell was everywhere else. Romeo shouted and tore his hair. He talked about killing himself. Fortunately, however, Romeo's shouting stopped when a messenger brought him a letter from Juliet. The good Friar Lawrence took this opportunity to urge Romeo. You have killed Tybalt. Now you want to kill yourself, too? How selfish and ridiculous! You are alive, and Juliet is alive, too. She has become your dear lady. How can you think of dying? What would happen to her? Be courageous like a man should be. You should be thinking about your and Juliet's future. When Romeo was a little calmer, Friar Lawrence made a plan. He said that Romeo should go to the town of Mantua and hide for a while. The friar would stay in Verona and speak to the lovers' families. He would tell them the truth. Perhaps when the lords learn of this marriage, they will end their quarrel, he said. Go to Juliet tonight. Tomorrow go to Mantua and wait for my message. That night, Romeo went to find Juliet in secret. They spent the night together in Juliet's bedroom. They were very happy, but also sad. The next day they would separate. They did not know when they'd see each other again. The morning arrived too soon. Romeo said goodbye to Juliet with a sad heart. He promised to write her letters every day. He climbed down the wall and stood staring up at Juliet. Juliet's mind was very afraid.
I am afraid. To my eyes, you look like one who has died,
she cried. Romeo also felt afraid. If anyone saw him, he would be in serious trouble. He quickly left. This was only the beginning of the lovers' terrible tragedy. Romeo had only been gone from Verona for a few days when the trouble began. Juliet's father decided that Juliet should marry a man named Paris. Her father did not know that his young daughter was already married. Paris was a young, noble, and handsome man. Juliet might have liked him very much if she had never met Romeo, but now she could love no one else. Juliet was very afraid. She tried to persuade Lord Capulet that she was too young to marry. She said that her cousin Tybalt's death had made her sad and ill. She couldn't marry anyone now. It would be terrible for the Capulets to celebrate a marriage so soon after Tybalt's death. Juliet gave her father every reason why she couldn't marry Paris. but the true one. But Lord Capulet would not listen. "You will marry Paris on Thursday, which is in 2 days," he said firmly. He ordered Juliet to get ready for the wedding. Juliet didn't know what to do. She decided to go and talk to Friar Lawrence. Perhaps he could help her make a plan. After they had talked a while about the terrible situation, Friar Lawrence had an idea. "Lady Juliet, I think I can help you. But this plan is very strange. You must have courage."
"I would die rather than marry Paris. My own Romeo is waiting for me. I am not afraid,"
said Juliet. "Then here is what you must do. Go home and pretend to be happy. Tell your father you will marry Paris. Tomorrow night is the night before your marriage to Paris. You must drink this bottle of medicine which I am giving you. When you drink this medicine, you will fall asleep for almost 2 days. You will appear cold and dead. When they find you on Thursday morning, they will think you are dead. Then your family will take you to be buried in the family tombs. Now, Lady Juliet, if you will do this, and not be afraid, then when you wake up, Romeo will be with you. I will tell Romeo of our plan. Romeo will come to the family tomb in the night. When you wake up, he will take you to Mantua." Juliet agreed to this plan. The friar gave her the medicine. When Juliet left the friar's house, she met with Paris. She agreed to marry him in 2 days. This news made Lord and Lady Capulet very happy. Everyone was busy getting ready for the wedding. There would be feasting, dancing, and music. On Wednesday night, Juliet took out the bottle. She felt a little afraid. What if the friar had given her poison? What if she woke up before Romeo came? Then she would be alone in the dark, cold tomb of the Capulet family. She would be surrounded by dead Capulets. Bloody Tybalt would be there. But her love for Romeo gave her courage. Juliet drank the liquid, and the next morning, when Paris came to find her, she appeared to be dead. Paris was of course very upset, but his feelings were little compared to Juliet's parents. Juliet was their only child. Now, instead of a wedding, they were having a funeral. Meanwhile, the friar had written a letter to Romeo which said, "When you hear of Juliet's death, do not be sad. She is living. I have given her some sleeping medicine. The funeral is not real. Your lady will lay in the tomb for only a short time. You must go to her and take her to Mantua." Unfortunately, bad news always travels faster than good. Romeo heard that his Juliet had died before the friar's letter reached him. Romeo immediately prepared to return to Verona with one of his servants. He wanted to see his wife in her tomb. Romeo was so unhappy he wanted to die. On the way to Verona, he stopped at a medicine shop and bought some poison. He decided to kill himself, so he and Juliet would be together. So Romeo returned to Verona to see the dead Juliet, or so he thought. "After I have kissed her cold lips, I will die too," he thought. "Then we will be buried together." At midnight, Romeo arrived at the church of Verona. There were many tombs surrounding it. The largest was the Capulet's tomb. Romeo had a light with him and a spade and wrenching iron. He would use the tool to open the door of the tomb. As Romeo was doing this, he was interrupted by a shout. "Horrible Montague!" someone cried. This was the young man, Paris. He had come to Juliet's tomb to put flowers on her grave. He saw Romeo and knew he was a Montague. Paris did not know why Romeo was there. He only knew that Romeo was the enemy of the Capulet family. "Have you come here to disturb this lady's body, you criminal?" said Paris angrily. "Go away, I warn you. I killed Tybalt, and I will kill you too," said Romeo coldly. Paris attacked Romeo. but Romeo was a good fighter. He killed Paris quickly and easily. Then he broke into Juliet's tomb. There she lay. She looked fresh and beautiful. Death has no power over her. Her cheeks are as pink as roses, Romeo whispered. Next to Juliet's body lay the dead Tybalt. Romeo now felt sorry for Tybalt's death. Cousin Tybalt, do not be angry. I am about to do you good by killing your enemy, myself, said Romeo. Then Romeo kissed Juliet's cold lips and drank the poison he had bought. A minute later, he was dead. He never knew that Juliet was alive. The good priest, Friar Lawrence, learned that his letter hadn't reached Romeo. He came to the tomb to find Juliet. The friar saw a light burning in the Capulet's tomb. Then he saw the open door, and then the bodies of Romeo and Paris. Before the friar had time to think, Juliet woke up. She saw the friar standing there. Then she realized where she was and why she was there.
Where is Romeo?
She asked the friar, but the friar only said, Lady Juliet, you must come out of there. Something terrible has happened. But before he could explain, the friar heard a noise. Someone was coming. Very afraid, he ran away. Now Juliet saw Romeo lying dead on the ground. The cup of poison was in his hands. She quickly guessed that he had killed himself.
I would drink this poison too, if there was any left,
she said.
I will kiss your lips. Perhaps there is some poison there,
she said to Romeo. Then Juliet saw Romeo's knife. Quickly she grabbed the knife and pushed it into her chest. She died by her lover Romeo's side. Then many people came running. Someone had seen Paris and Romeo fighting, and gone to find some soldiers. Soon everyone in the town of Verona knew something was happening at the Capulet's tomb.
Who is dead? Who is alive? Paris? Romeo? Juliet?
Everyone said. Soon all the noises woke up the Lord Capulet and the Lord Montague. When these two reached the graveyard, they saw a terrible sight. Romeo and Juliet lay next to each other, both dead. Then the friar who had returned told Lord Capulet and Lord Montague the whole sad story. He told them how Romeo and Juliet had met, fallen in love, and secretly married. I was glad for this marriage. I was going to tell you about it, hoping that your quarrel would end, said the friar sadly. But before I could do so, Lord Capulet tried to make Juliet marry Paris. So Juliet and I created a plan where Romeo would find her and take her to Mantua. But the plan failed. My letter to Romeo was late. I do not know why. Now they are both really and truly dead. As for Paris, I do not know why he also is here, he said sadly. One of Paris's servants then came forward. He explained that Romeo and Paris had fought, and Romeo had killed Paris. Then a servant of Romeo's explained that Romeo had written his parents a letter. The letter was only to be delivered if Romeo died. Romeo had written that he was sorry to cause his parents pain, but his love, Juliet, had died, so he wanted to die too. Fortunately for the Friar Lawrence, the Capulets and Montagues decided that he was not to blame for these sad deaths. Meanwhile, the Prince of Verona had arrived. Lord Capulet and Lord Montague, do you see what has happened now because of your quarrel? Both your children are dead. Dead because of love. God has punished you for your hatred, using the love of your children for each other. These two lords agreed to end the long hatred between their families. We will be like brothers from now on, they said sadly. Lord Montague said, Brother Capulet, I will build a statue of your true and loyal daughter, Juliet. No lady will be more respected than she. I also will build a statue. It will be a statue of your son Romeo. He loved my daughter so much that he died rather than live without Juliet," said Lord Capulet sadly. So these two poor old men became friends again. The town of Verona was peaceful once again, but the price that these families paid for peace and friendship, the lives of their children, was too terrible. The lords could only hope that these lovers were together in heaven.